Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Vermont Women Owning Woodlands Network, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar presentation entitled Empowering and Engaging Vermont Women Landowners. My name is Kate Four, and I'm a community forestry specialist with the Vermont Urban and Community Forestry Program based out of UVM Extension. I want to take a minute to introduce you to our Vermont WOW team. Joining us on the webinar today is Caitlin Cusack with Vermont Land Trust, Lisa Salsville with Vermont Coverts, Andrea Shortsleeve with Vermont Fish and Wildlife, Kathleen Wanner with Vermont Woodland Association, Vermont Woodland Association, and Nancy Patch with Vermont Forest Parks and Recreation. In addition to these folks on the call today, we also have other team members. I just want to acknowledge Beth Holtzman, who works with the Women's Agricultural Network out of UVM Extension. Before we get started with today's presentation, I'm going to go through a few quick logistics. As participants on the webinar today, your microphones will be muted. However, we would love to hear from you throughout the presentation. So please go ahead and use the question box in the GoToWebinar side panel to type in any questions, reflections, or questions that you have throughout the presentation. As the facilitator of the webinar today, I'll be monitoring the question box and we'll be reading off any questions or comments as they come in. Finally, the webinar today is approved for one SAF continuing education credit, as well as one Vermont Forester licensing credit. At the end of the presentation, you'll get a link to a short survey. This survey should only take about 2 to 3 minutes and will provide us not only with feedback on today's webinar, but it'll also be a place for you to request those continuing education credits. The SAF credit submission process will include, basically, I'll send the information to SAF and I'll email out a certificate at the end of the webinar, or probably later this morning, to those who have requested those credits. So please go ahead and fill out that survey after the webinar so that I know who to send that certificate to. And then if you don't have time to complete the survey on GoToWebinar right after the webinar this morning, please note that GoToWebinar does send a survey, I think 24 hours after the webinar, in case you missed it right after the webinar. The webinar today is being recorded and will be available through the Vermont's new on-demand webinar library. That's a place where Vermont licensed foresters can receive continuing education credits for viewing archived webinars, and that can be found at rvermontwoods.org/VT Forestry Webinar Library.org. I think that's it for the logistics for the webinar today. And so with that, again, welcome everybody. I'm really excited to have everybody join us today. And I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Caitlin Cusack, who's going to launch the presentation.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kate, and thanks everyone for zooming in today. As you can appreciate from the folks who are just introduced, what we're about to share today is the result of a very collaborative effort. So in terms of a roadmap, I'm going to provide a quick background context on the Women Owning Woodlands research and our efforts here in Vermont. And then Nancy Patch, is then going to dive into details on what we heard from Vermont's women landowners. So I'd like you all to start by imagining a moment when you felt out of your comfort zone or faced with a problem you didn't feel like you had the skills to address. For me, as maybe many of you can appreciate, these type of moments as of late involve technology. You likely felt overwhelmed and frustrated. And this is how many women landowners we heard from felt and feel when it comes to owning land. As one woman shared, quote, "I'd love to connect with other women managing woodlots. I'm doing everything self-taught and on a tight budget. It feels overwhelming to do it alone. Connecting with other women that care about their land is very important to me and essential to building a network of women that can help one another out." Now I want you to take a moment and think about when you felt strong and capable. Maybe that moment involved the incredibly empowering and really satisfying feeling of using a chainsaw to lay up firewood to heat your house. Or maybe it's entering the woods feeling prepared, able to navigate where you want to go to. Or knowing that you possess the skills and knowledge to care for a forest well. And that when you're uncertain about something, you know what resources to consult or have a group of colleagues who you can turn to for advice. So this is the essence of what WOW is about. Empowering women landowners through new knowledge, skills, and a peer-based support network. So while we're going to focus today on what we heard from women woodland owners, you'll notice in the program goal that we have displayed here on the screen, we're explicitly including non-woodland owners. So we call these folks woodland enthusiasts because not everyone can afford to own land or may not really want to own land. Yet these folks still have an interest in learning more and a role to play in its stewardship. Nancy, do you mind moving
okay. Yeah, no, the screen is frozen.
Oh dear.
Right. We had this trouble earlier as we were looking to. I'm going to have to come back on. It looks
Okay.
like.
Sounds good. So remember everyone what I was saying about
Sure.
the
Here we go. Here we
technology?
go.
Here we go. All right. Thanks, Nancy.
Sure.
Okay, so to date, there are about 20 established women-owning woodland programs around the country. In Vermont, for the last 10 years or so, some of the partners that were introduced at the beginning have hosted events for women landowners. So the photo here is of a weekend WOW retreat that Vermont Woodlands Association, you can see Kathleen in the bottom right, hosted in Grafton in 2012. But until recently, these efforts were more scattershot. So several partners, the group that we introduced at the beginning, came together in 2018 to think about how we could create a formal WOW network here in Vermont. So we collaborated on a successful grant from the High Meadows Fund to embark on a year-plus-long journey to better understand the needs of women landowners, to identify any gaps in education or outreach, and develop strategies for meeting those needs. So we're through this initial journey, but I feel like in many ways it's only really begun. We've convened a meeting of partner organizations in June 2019, hosted 2 focus groups with women landowners, interviewed several women-owning woodland programs across the country about how they operate and lessons learned, administered an online survey, and now maintain an e-news list of over 300. Nancy, next slide, please. Thank you. So you may be wondering, why focus on women landowners? So I wanted to share some of the data from the National Woodland Owners Survey. And so this information really indicates that women are a significant portion of the landowner population. In fact, 38% of the total forest land in Vermont is owned either solely by women or jointly by women. And so you can see those, the orange, the solid orange, whoops, there we go. Okay. Solid orange is basically where females are the sole owner. The next one, the kind of dotted mottled orange, is where females are the primary owner, and male, in answering the National Woodland Owner Survey, male would be the secondary owner. And then sort of down below, whoops.
Keep going back and forth. Sorry, I'll get it down.
Thanks, Nancy. Buckle your seatbelts, everyone. And then you'll notice the green sort of modeled at the bottom. That's where males are the primary owner and females had answered the survey as the secondary owner. So total, women influence over 1.5 million acres of forest land in Vermont, and this is only expected to increase. So just to share nationally, in some research done, the percentage of family forest ownerships with women as a primary decision maker increased from 11% in 2006 to 22% in 2013. So this is sort of the trend that we're facing. Okay, Nancy. So what is the problem that we're trying to address, or what is one of the motivating factors that brought all of us together? And so I share here just some research conducted by Catherine Mader that revealed that the challenges of land ownership are more significant for women than men. And despite this fact, outreach efforts to engage landowners in forest management programs across the country have not really reached women as successfully as men. So while women cite, quote, lack of knowledge as a primary barrier to owning forest land, they may not necessarily attend the conventional landowner programming because they feel that it's not really directed towards them. So something really needs to change about our current outreach and education model. So developing women-focused programs where women feel comfortable to ask questions, share goals, practice technical skills, and gain confidence really leads to empowered and informed land management decisions, and thus a cared for forest landscape. Next slide, Nancy. So finally, my last point to share is that part of this journey, we partnered with an environmental studies senior seminar at Middlebury College taught by Dr. Mez Baker-Medard. And this happened during the winter and spring of 2020, which we all know is when the world kind of flipped upside down. But I think the students were still really able to analyze the data and develop some recommendations that our committee is able to share with you today. So Nancy, I will turn it over to you.
Great, thanks so much. I'm happy to be here with you this morning. This slide is here just to kind of give you a summary of what we're going to be talking about as we move through the rest of the webinar. We've kind of introduced already what WOW is and why it's important to have this. I'm going to be talking a little bit about what those spaces might be like, who are we serving and what do they want? And we're going to be asking you also to think about what it is that we could be providing for women landowners through our work as foresters. And also, how does this fit in with your work? So we're looking for feedback here and hoping to have a conversation about this work as we go forward. There's some work that's been done that talks about how important it is for people in shared spaces that are like each other to be comfortable. So this idea of affinity spaces being areas where people with shared interests can engage in kind of a peer-to-peer informal network that gives people confidence. People can learn from each other, and as professionals, we can be engaged with those people as well, but also just allowing people to share their own experiences gives that peer-to-peer network all that power. We're going to be quoting some of the responses from the survey throughout the webinar. I think this one was already quoted by Caitlin. I'll be just reading them out. I think that giving women a voice is really important in all of this. So as Caitlin already read this one before, I'll just read the second one here out loud. And I love the idea of a women's woodland network and feel it would greatly help. So, what are the interests of these women that we've gathered from this survey? The survey provided us with a wealth of information. We're going to be talking about what women landowners are like in Vermont, what the demographics are and the interests of all the women landowners. We can parse those interests out. Looking at the survey was very complex, but we can break things out by county, age, property size, where there's all kinds of information to be mined out of the survey. And we're going to just show you some of those things that we were able to pull out that we think is really important. Here it's that the property ownership structure, I think, is incredibly important and important to foresters reaching out to their client base. 24% of individual single owners 24% of women are individual owners of their property. That's an enormous number that we could work to reach out and allow to feel comfortable in the decision-making on their forest land. 53% of the women that responded are joint owners with their spouses. And in my experience, I've had working with landowners, both as a consulting forester and as a county forester, I find that women are very, very engaged. But there can be some deference. And 10% of those women landowners are joint owners with multiple partners. And you can see it's a breakdown in that in the graph, just the amount of landscape that ranges from from a small amount of land to very large amounts of land. And in Vermont, in the current use program, you can see that there's a vast number of women that are engaged in the current use program. Another quote, just to bring us into reality, is I never anticipated becoming the owner of such a large parcel of woodland. I don't know that I have the skills to make informed decisions about my woods, and I don't know where to get those. and how to navigate conversations about that with my husband. So this indicates that a joint ownership with a husband and wife team, that while the woman was really interested in engaging with this, there are barriers to going forward. So the response from women about why they purchased their land was really interesting. And I don't know if this is that different overall from some of the work that's been done across New England, but it really stood out for us that women really are interested in these four criteria. Privacy was number one, interested in purchasing land for the beauty of the land, to protect nature, and to enjoy nature, to recreate on their properties. Those were the real standouts on what women care about on their landscape. And this is something that we as foresters can really think about and bring into the way that we address women. And these are the things that people care about. It's always important to start from where landowners are. What do they care about on their property in order to really engage someone and move forward with forest management? The top three activities that women engage in is hiking and walking and watching wildlife. We're going to see that over and over again as we go through this webinar, but they're also incredibly interested in getting personal firewood off their property, as well as income and doing timber harvest. It was interesting to see, though, that women really were very interested in the firewood aspect of owning woodland. The things that women will use on the property, again, that firewood just came up. I think women are very interested in learning how to work directly on the landscape, hands-on. So their sugaring comes up as well. So women are really engaged with learning how to use chainsaws. They really are, would like to be, there's a little bit more empowerment that is been very successful. Certainly sugar makers, lots of women are sugar makers. You can see that people are engaged with bird-friendly maple and tapping birch trees. So there's a lot of aspects that people are interested in. This is an interesting quote I'll read. This is evidenced by more than one women when we talk to people that so here's the quote: "I've hired men to help with projects, but have found the opinions too varying to follow and too linked with their work agenda to trust if it's the right choice for the land. And to be perfectly honest, have had very inappropriate offers and encounters explicitly because I am a single woman, making it very difficult to simply learn and manage the woods with confidence." So this is something that is important for the forestry community to understand and be prepared to speak with women landowners, again, coming from where they are and maybe not from where we are. So here's a pause, and as Kate said before, you can make your comments in the question area. So here, how might women woodland owners be unique as clients for you? So go ahead and enter some thoughts in the chat, and we're just going to pause here for a second. Kate will take this over.
Great, thank you, Nancy. So again, folks, we'd love to hear some comments, reflections, thoughts on this question from you. You can enter those into the question box in the side panel of GoToWebinar, and just go ahead and type them right into the text box there, and we'll give you a minute to do that. I see a couple of hands are raised, so again, I know that folks are eager to share, so go ahead and type any questions or thoughts or comments regarding this question in that question box in your side panel of GoToWebinar. I'll give folks just another minute to add in some comments, but again, you know, this is a great place for you to share some of your thoughts and reflections with us. We really want this webinar to be participatory, given the best that it can be, given the format. And it looks like now we have some comments that have come in. So I'm going to go ahead and read those off. We have a comment from Harris. A bunch of my clients are women landowners on their own, and I find that them to be some of the best clients, good communicators, and I appreciate the work that I do. So very positive comment there. Thank you, Harris, for sharing. We have another comment from Eleanor. I'm starting to prepare my land for silvopasturing based on Steve Gabriel's book, and she's interested in help in navigating that. So Eleanor, we're happy to follow up with you after the webinar on resources for silvopasturing. A comment from Dan saying generally he's found that they're more open to hearing what I have to say and getting all the facts, less likely to be set in their ways. An interesting reflection. Thank you, Dan. Any other thoughts, again, on how women landowners might be unique as clients, or reflections that folks want to share? We'll give you another minute before we move on. I'm curious too, you know, just any thoughts from folks out there, you know, on you know, general experiences or reflections now that you've heard all this data and have a better sense maybe of who Vermont's landowners are. You know, what experiences, sort of how all this information jives with your experiences and you know, the work that you've done working with women landowners. There's a comment here from Steve saying that he's found that they're more open to varying ideas on how to approach a management. So an interesting reflection. And we have a couple of comments, one from Betsy saying, Betsy, I'm going to make the assumption that that you're a landowner, and you talk about that sometimes it gets physically overwhelming working on the land, especially around invasives. And I think all of us can certainly appreciate that comment and feel your pain. Invasives can be a real struggle to manage, and a lot of oftentimes physically demanding in terms of removal and management techniques. A comment here from John. Not being a woman, I especially am interested in knowing this more about this perspective from others. That he shares that he has a few women clients, and that he's found that they have generally a gentle touch on the land, less focus on maximizing profits. A comment here from Jason saying, I found that women landowners are more open-minded and curious to learn more. I've worked with a number of women landowners whose husbands have passed away and leaving them suddenly in charge of land and oftentimes feeling underprepared. Thank you for sharing that, Jason. One final comment here from Margaret. In my work working with landowners to manage habitat, female landowners have often showed a strong interest in conservation. So thank you, Margaret, for sharing that. Thank you, everybody, for sharing those thoughts and reflections. Nancy, I'll turn it back over to you to continue the conversation.
Great, thanks. And I think those reflections were incredibly valuable. It actually reflected completely on what we were getting as response from some of the women landowners. So thank you for that. To continue on and following up with what Margaret just said, that some of the things that are the most important for women landowners are habitat improvements. That rises to the top if you look at the chart there. Invasive species, something else that was mentioned, that it can be incredibly overwhelming for all of us, for sure, but it's very labor intensive to manage invasives, but there's a strong interest in doing so. And then just a kind of a naturalist point of view that women woodland owners often really just want to learn more about their land and learn ways to love their land more. Conservation is an aspect of that. You can see the conservation easements kind of come down at the bottom. And that may be reflected in different, either through knowledge, or it might be the size of the property, but it is of great interest. But you can see these are the things that people really care about, women really care about on their land. When you start looking at forest management, that kind of goes towards the bottom of the pack as well. So that's something that I think as foresters, we can actually improve upon as people and as women understand, and general landowners understand that forest management gets to all of those things up above. So that's kind of our goal and our responsibility in terms of education, but we know that's what people want to hear about. If we parse this down a little bit by age, we can see that older landowners are showing interest in passing land and estate planning. Many women that have end up owning land when perhaps their husbands have passed away have found that can sometimes be overwhelming. So it makes sense that women are very interested in seeing how that continues on with perhaps a greater ease. And of course, in the older age group, both men and women are interested in that estate planning to make sure that there's continuity. This is where conservation easements come up in a much larger way as well. But younger women, you can see, show a greater interest in learning more about forest management and getting income from the land. And often this is something that women have voiced interested in doing themselves. So there is some work that people would like to, that the interest in chainsaw safety and chainsaw learning, game of logging is very popular with women. There's been comments about how they would like to learn more about getting on the land and having equipment that could be more suited for their abilities. So we can see that there's hands-on in the younger group. The older landowners are really interested in maintaining continuity. So some quotes here. I could care for my woods better if only I had more time and knowledge and community. Another woman said more education about what my options are. And another, education, resources, and inspiration. So I think that these comments can really be utilized when we look at the words. You know, we look at community, we look at education, options, inspiration. So finding ways to inspire landowners on their own landscape really moves toward an opening for forest management to take place. So here we were just at a reflection point. Here's a quick other reflection point, perhaps, or based on the interest of women woodland owners, what information could you provide to help them meet their goals? So what are some of the things that you might do differently, perhaps, with a woman landowner, or just maybe expand the educational skills that you have with all landowners? What are some of the things that you can see might help women landowners move toward management? As Kate said before, we really want this to be interactive. We want to learn from you. We've learned so much from the survey that we received from the women. So this is an opportunity to get additional feedback.
Great, thanks, Nancy. And so we do have a couple of comments that have already come in. One was sent in actually regarding the last question, but it came in after we'd moved on. But so I just want to share it quickly because I really appreciate it. It's from Diana, and she says, women woodland owners seem to be more excited about learning. However, they need to be respected and given the facts. This is how I often feel about car repairs and finding somebody that I can trust. And I just really appreciate that comment and that analogy. Thank you, Diana. That's great. A comment from John. I'm very surprised by the data on the % of women interest in practices to protect water quality. Is this reflected elsewhere? A good question from John. Nancy, thoughts on that?
I guess I don't know if there's reflected elsewhere in the survey. It's something we could certainly look at. Again, the use of land recreating and protecting nature has risen up many times, the idea of protecting nature and caring for their land. And so water quality is certainly one of those, caring for the land.
So we have a comment from Steve. I think the first and foremost thing is the importance of natural resource professionals. Excuse me, I'm trying to read and comments are coming in, so things are moving here. I think the first and foremost thing that is important for natural resource professionals to do is to listen and truly understand what those goals are. We can't assume to know what anybody's goals are, and based on that, we should connect women landowners with resources that can help them. Thanks, Steve. A comment from Betsy. One good part of the COVID-19 has been all the amazing webinars, especially around topics such as woodlands and forests. She specifically mentions Ethan Tapper's webinars and YouTube channel, as well as others. So thank you, Betsy. That's true. I think the access to online education during COVID-19 has been, and the overall interest. I mean, I would say, from my experience running webinars over the last 6 months, our attendance has just been incredible. So making sure that women have access to educational resources and education opportunities is certainly an important thing that as practitioners we can help do. A couple of more comments have come in here. One from Harris, perhaps giving tours showing management operations with a light touch could be helpful. So that's a great idea, Harris. Thank you for sharing. A comment from Dan, more in-person time in the forest. This goes for all clients really, but could be helpful to plan for time in the woods, meeting with clients, and thinking through projects such as forest management and harvesting administration, forest management practices. I believe that's what FMP stands for, and harvest administration. Thanks, Dan. That's a great idea. Another comment here from Margaret. I also think that it's important not to overwhelm folks with information. Such an important point. It helps to be intentional about what is most appropriate and to give them information that relates to their interests. From Kathleen, I think having opportunities for women to learn and to ask questions in an environment in which they feel comfortable should be a priority. Often programs are designed specifically for women do this. Great. And then
go ahead.
Yes, say one last question or one last comment from Eleanor. Information that I would appreciate to have would be a roadmap once my goals have been defined. For example, who to contact. Great. Well, thank you everybody for sharing all those reflections and comments. Nancy, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, great. Those are very helpful. The idea of tours and that one comment about allowing women to be in a safe space. And so we talked about those affinity spaces that are with programs designed for women, that gives one of those opportunities. And I love the idea that, it's true that we now are recognizing that this type of presentation, these webinars and online presentations, is making it accessible to all kinds of people, including women that are overwhelmed sometimes with work, careers, childcare, the inability to attend workshops that are in person on a regular basis. So these are kinds of things that we're learning through both this survey, your responses, and the experience that we've been having through the pandemic. Excellent, thank you. Just a quick, some more demographic information here that I think is incredibly important. That most of the people that responded from our survey, by the way, the survey responses we had a large number, over 800 responses, but we parsed that out just to, this information here is only from woodland owners. So there are 570 responses, which is was determined to be statistically significant as a response of a survey. So these numbers here on this webinar are only from the participants in the survey that actually own land. There are other information came from this survey from all of our constituency, but just so you know. And in this case, living on the land, 77% of the respondents did say that they were there on site. 68% had management plans. 60 of them were eligible for the current use program. Many of them said that they understood the plan well, but had some technical confusion, which is not to be unexpected with the parameters that are required in a UVA plan. So those are some of those things that we can work on. 78% of the women said that the plan did meet their goals. That's a really high response, and that just gives credit to the professional foresters that are working in the landscape and assisting women landowners. Another really high number is that 83% have implemented activities on their land. So that shows that women are very open to doing work on the land. It's just defining what that work is, how it meets their goals. It's interesting that, and these numbers, it's kind of hard sometimes to parse the numbers out, but it appeared that when women consulted a forester, 56% of the women consulted a forester and 50% hired a forester. So it's again interesting that we have a very high number of implementation of activities, goal meeting, but have they hired a forester to do all of those things in assistance with implementation? So that may be how people did respond. Did I hire a forester beyond the forest management plan? These are just assumptions we can't fully determine, but it is interesting that we don't have a higher number of women hiring foresters to help them with their work. So that's something all of us need to kind of consider and think about, and how we can better reach women landowners. So, the question we posed in the survey is, what would make a difference in managing your forest? These are 3 quotes. One woman responded with more money for planning and implementation. That kind of leads me to think that this is about non-commercial activities. So needing more money for the planning and the implementation of forest management. Another woman said better skills, chainsaw, equipment use, and tools I can manage. So that has been something that has been raised in many different arenas of women working in the natural resources world, is having the equipment and the tools that can fit to their physicality. And the last, which is something that I found very interesting, was a forester who is proactive. So someone that is reaching out and not waiting to be contacted, a forester who is proactive. So one of the things that we want to do is that we really want to find a way to work together to make this, give success to women that own woodland on the landscape, either on their own, with partners, or with a number of people, so that women can feel like they can contribute to the decision making on the landscape. Not only when they own the land themselves, when they're sometimes overwhelmed and not sure in what direction to go, but also when communicating with their partners, communicating with their husbands or their other partners or their family members, when there are times when we do know that women have responded from this survey that they are more vocal when on their own than when working in a mixed group. So this is something that we can help women engage more on the landscape with their decision making. But how do we do that? And some of the things that came up in the webinar today, some really good ideas, workshops which come here working together with workshops, field trips, webinars, retreats, the one-on-one and the peer-to-peer. So that peer-to-peer is that affinity group, which many women responded saying that it would be very important to get together in those spaces. We do know as foresters that we spend a lot of time one-on-one, And that is very, very effective, but doesn't allow women to understand or connect people to other people that may have the same problems. But several people did respond already that I was very encouraged that people talking about listening, making sure that the goals, women's goals are being met, giving respect, providing the resources. The webinars, very, very clearly, we have found out that these are effective ways to reach all kinds of audiences. Field trips and workshops are a little harder for people to get to with our busy lives, and even more so in the midst of a pandemic, but we can find ways to do that. I've certainly have myself done several talks and walks with social distancing and masks that has been very effective. So we can continue to do this, and with additional help from the forestry professionals, we can get there. I think this is my last slide on quotes, but so what, if anything, has prevented or discouraged you from attending a woodland workshop in the past? And I kind of alluded to some of this: time, money, family, travel distance. You know, we have busy lives, and it's difficult sometimes to find the time. Another woman said, I'm a full-time single parent and do not have financial latitude. I can usually find childcare, but extremely limited financial resources are the main factor that keep me from taking time off and affording the expense of travel. So finding ways to meet landowners on their land through these webinars, that may be a very good way to meet some of the hurdles that women have. Another woman responded that she's a recent widow and dealing with financial hardship. So you can see that this comes up again and again when women are now faced with owning the land after years perhaps of working with their partners and now having it all on their own, just with their own decisions, can be overwhelming. So assistance from a proactive forester could, with respect and care and patience, can really lend a great deal to helping with women woodland owners. We have also found that some of the programming preferences that kind of came up is that written materials were really important to people, hands-on field activities really important, and many women are self-taught. So if they're given resources, they can move forward. In terms of workshops, it varied, and it did vary from, some people could not do weekends, some people could not do weekdays, but primarily a partial day makes the most sense for people and not a full day. Weekends and weekdays both kind of came up as that would work, but we do think we want to keep these. The retreats probably didn't make as much sense. It was really hard for women to leave their homes for multiple days on end, especially if they have children to deal with childcare. We did see that there was also a real mix of people's response of kind of the types of workshops. We talked about these affinity spaces, and for some women that was incredibly important. So really coming at this from an individual point of view. So it does show up that the majority would enjoy a women-focused group. It's almost 67%. But at the same time, there were people that are very open to mixed gender participants, as well as having professionals of both genders to be the professional leaders. So that people were open to that. So female instructors, while it kind of rose a little higher, it was still, people were still open to these kinds of mixed meetings, as well as men leading the group. I think the focus there, though, is again giving that peer-to-peer connection for women to share their experiences with each other. Some of the ways that we looked at how the communication, the feedback, the connecting, they liked Front Porch Forum. You know, this came out in a very big way, that this has been a very popular way for people to get information. So there are others, kind of the newspapers came up as high compared. These were all the choices that were given. And then where they would like to, what they would like to do, how they would like to receive this. There were some people that would really be very interested in hosting an event on their own woodland. So that is really important for consulting foresters to think about, that there may be landowners that would like to share what they have on their own landscape. And I've experienced this myself with our with a woodlots program that I'm engaged with. That people really are empowered when they can be on their own land and show what they have done. And it allows other people to say, well, wait, I can do that too. So attending and participating in events really was something that people wanted to do, as well as these finding a forum. And that's something we're thinking about at WOW, is to think about what kind of a forum we can develop. Will it be an email forum, a blog, newsletters? Those are the kinds of things that we're trying to determine what steps we'll move forward. And this is the last slide for reflections. We really like to get some feedback from you all, that what can we do? What can WOW, Women Owning Woodland Group of Vermont, do to help you connect more effectively with women landowners? And what information or training do you think you might need that would help not just you, but you in the connecting with women woodland owners? So could you take another minute or two to kind of think about these questions, and Kate will monitor and read them off to the rest of us.
Great, thanks, Nancy. And so while we're waiting for comments to come in, just wanted to share a couple of comments that have come in during the last little section there. We had a comment from Peter just acknowledging that knowing that community is so important, that having groups like Vermont Coverts and local woodland groups such as the Wyndham Regional Woodlands Association are good outlets. And as professionals, connecting women landowners to these networks is maybe one strategy to help connect them to more of a sense of community. A few more comments that have come in, just sort of again, I think sort of harkening back to the conversation around what practitioners can do. There's a comment from Sam that I thought was really interesting, just acknowledging that many of the women landowners and property owners that he is working with or has been starting to use. Sorry. Like that got a little garbled there as I was trying to read and things are coming in. Let me start from the beginning. Sam was saying that a number of women that property owners and managers that he knows, both in terms of recreation and full-time landowners, are choosing to use battery-powered chainsaws as a lightweight alternative and easy to start, less maintenance. And that comment really struck me, because I think one of the things that our WOW team has talked about, and some of the feedback that we got from the survey, is just some of the barriers that exist around skills and confidence around tools, and just the dynamic of kind of how a lot of our forestry tools have evolved over the years, and how as women, how can we physically take advantage of sort of more efficient use and technique around tools. So I thought that was an interesting comment. Let's hear a few more comments that have come in. One from Harris. Just having organizations such as WOW to refer women landowners to is really helpful. So that's a great comment, Harris, and certainly as the WOW team, we're doing our part to sort of carve a future for what VT WOW looks like. So this is, I think, an exciting first step, and we look forward to sharing more. And I know Nancy will talk more about the resources that we've already pulled together. Eleanor mentions a listserv. Nancy will mention this, I think, at the end of the presentation today, but we do have an e-newsletter that we're working on and are starting to compile email list, or a list of emails for women landowners in Vermont in order to increase direct communication. So great idea, Eleanor, something that we're already working towards. Let's see here. Training tools, as you mentioned, would be helpful. So again, connecting folks to resources and suggestions on how to use tools and offering training opportunities around that was one idea that resonated with a participant. A comment here, I would benefit greatly from a directory, contact information of women landowners broken down by county, particularly during this pandemic. It is very helpful to have somebody to reach out to in my community. So a great idea from Yvette, thinking about sort of how to really create and foster those peer-to-peer networks. That's a great suggestion. Margaret suggests a clearinghouse for information, who to reach out to, depending on interest. Sam brings up the point around connecting women to careers in forestry, especially around the forest economy. There's both a need and an opportunity to bring women into the sector. It would be very helpful to understand what barriers exist for them. Great point, Sam, and thank you for sharing that. So breaking down barriers to women in the career of forestry is certainly something that our team has talked about, and understanding that a little bit better would be a great thing to explore. Let's see here. I think that's pretty much it, Nancy.
Great, thanks.
Let's see here. One last.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, sorry, Nancy. One last comment from Jason, and just talking about getting general feedback. Just having access to the information that was generated by the survey about what women landowners like or have not liked with their interactions with forestry professionals is really helpful. And so great, Jason. I appreciate that feedback and that comment. And I think just part of our goal as a team today is just to start this conversation and share what we've learned as really, like I said, a conversation to help us all address some of the issues and challenges with working with women landowners. So Nancy, I'll turn it back over to you. And
okay, great, thanks. All of this conversation has been incredibly helpful. This really is the last slide. We're right on time, it looks like, but if you, this is our WOW website that you can go to find out more about what we're doing, and then to sign up for e-news by emailing the wownet@vermont@gmail.com. So we do have places where people can get engaged at currently, and hoping to maybe develop more ways as we move forward. So we're open at any time to answer additional questions, either now or in the future. And maybe it would be great we have an awesome team, I think, that has been working on this, but the more ideas, the better, right? So what did we miss? We'd be really, really open to hearing what maybe we haven't thought about yet. You only know what you know. So thanks everyone for listening and participating. And this topic is of great importance to the state of Vermont and to the forestry community.
Great, thanks so much, Nancy. And again, just a reminder to folks, as Nancy mentioned, the website actually on the screen. I believe that's the National WOW Network. Is that correct, Nancy?
Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, it is.
Yeah. That's okay. So yeah, so we didn't get into it today because there's only so much time, and really the focus of the presentation was sharing what we've learned about Vermont women landowners. But there is a national WOW network, and that offers a whole ton of really great resources, as well as an email listserv and opportunities for women forest landowners to connect on a national level. So if you go to that WOW website on the screen, and I'll add it to the chat box before we hang up today, or we end the webinar today, you'll find information on connecting to that national network. Also, as Nancy mentioned, we do have an e-newsletter, and so to subscribe to that, please go ahead and use that email address, wownetvt@gmail.com. And also, if you have any feedback, like Nancy said, that's the best email address to contact our group, share ideas, share further questions or thoughts on, what as a group we should be focusing our efforts on in support of women landowners. I'll give folks just a second to submit any questions or last comments or thoughts. As we're waiting for any last minute questions or thoughts to come in, I just want to remind folks that at the end of the webinar today, you will receive a link to complete a survey through GoToWebinar. As a reminder for folks who are looking for continuing education credits, and I know many of us are down to the wire on the renewal deadline for our Vermont Forester license. So this is approved for 1 SAF credit. If you click on that webinar survey, there'll be a survey that you can fill out to request the continuing education credits. And in addition to that, we also have added a couple of questions, again, very similar to the reflection questions that we had in the webinar today, but as an opportunity to get more feedback from you to help guide us in next steps for WOW Vermont. All right. Let's see here, just a couple of comments, just people sharing their appreciation. Dan says, I want to share my appreciation for women working in natural resources. Their presence in the field and their interactions with my female clients always helps. Awesome. Thanks, Dan. I want to, before we hang up today, I just want to, again, acknowledge the WOW team and thank everybody for their participation today. Anybody else on the WOW team want to end with any concluding thoughts?
I guess just here, it's Nancy, just here thanking everyone for caring about this subject. And I think we can really make a difference for many women that are actually out there struggling with trying to make decisions on the landscape. So thanks again for being here.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. And we appreciate you joining us. And again, look for the follow-up survey when you close out of the GoToWebinar system, that you should receive a pop-up message to complete that survey. And if you don't, there will be an email from GoToWebinar with a link to the survey within the next 24 hours. Thank you guys for participating today and for all the comments and reflections. Such a rich conversation and just really helpful, I think, for our team in thinking about this and how we as a team and as a network move forward. Thank you again, everybody. Enjoy the day.